Here's a silly question I bet you haven't thought about. Who owns your body? Who owns your body? Silly question, isn't it? Of course, it's you, isn't it? Or is it? I mean, have a look at cows, for example. Lovely field of Frisian cows, for example. Lovely, lovely cows. Do they own their bodies? Not if they're on a farm, they don't. You don't see many free-ranged cows just wandering around doing their own thing, having their own habitat. All cows, seems to me, certainly in this country, are all owned by somebody. Their bodies clearly owned by somebody because, well, they have all sorts of interference, don't they? If you're on a farm, you probably give them a vaccine to stop them from getting all sorts of bits and pieces and diseases. And if they get ill, a few antibodies are injected into them. And some cows, of course, in order to help them, are artificially inseminated so they can get pregnant even though they have not given consent or wanted to be pregnant. But that's cows. We're not cows, are we? We're human beings. We have a higher intelligence. We can communicate with one another. We have a sentient feeling about ourselves, and we can predict the future and do things and all of that. But then, hang on a minute. There used to be slaves, and in parts of the world there still are people enslaved. So who owns their bodies? Not them, not if they're enslaved. Nobody wants to be enslaved. And I thought, you know, in history, a long time ago, I thought, hang on a minute, haven't we got rid of the slaving business? We had the Navy going around making sure that other people weren't doing it. Seems that that's sort of stopped, but of course we know that there are people in sweatshops and earning a pittance, and basically their bodies are being owned by somebody else. But in this country, at the moment in time, we have a certain sovereignty. Sovereignty, the ability to have ownership of our own body and autonomy to be able to do whatever we like. Of course, we're constrained by what government's legal limits are. We're not really supposed to speed on the roads, are we? We can. Only we have to suffer the consequences. Naturally, you get a ticket, or we can't really park wherever we like, although we can. But again, we have to suffer the consequences. So we have a bunch of rules, and some of them are unfair and some of them are completely unnecessary. But we understand that that's how we have to live by them. But what if there were, I don't know, let's say megalomaniacs, let's say psychopaths, let's say a body of people who thought, they wanted to actually own our sovereignty, not just the nation's sovereignty and everything that we do and tell us how to respond to, I don't know, let's say a pandemic coming down in the future, and be able to say, look, this world government is going to tell you exactly how you should live, and will tell you also the sort of medications that you should be having. But these people, these megalomaniacs, these psychopaths, not only want to have the nation's sovereignty, they want to have sovereignty over you and me and our bodies, and be able to inject into us or give us all sorts of medical interventions that we would ordinarily possibly say, actually, do you know what? I'd rather not have that. I'd rather work it out for myself and decide with informed consent. Well, it does seem that the nation's sovereignty is about to be sold off. Amazingly, that the government, who are there to serve us, have decided, no, this is quite a good idea. The WEF and the World Health Organization have got these great ideas that they want to have one single world government in which they can dominate every nation and tell everybody what they are going to have to do. And so there is these treaties have been drafted which will give over our sovereignty, but not just the sovereignty of the country, our individual rights for our own bodies. Now, just think about that for a moment. And I don't want to scare people, because I don't want to be doing the work of these rather nasty people who are doing that, because their process is to scare people. You saw how the pandemic worked out. We were told there was a virus. The mainstream media went absolutely barking mad, pushing the frightening message. And then they came up with a solution. Don't worry, there's this vaccine. Yes, it'll be all right. Don't use anything else, which is cheaper and easier and quick to use. Wait for this magic cure. And then actually, as we've seen, a lot of people seem to have been harmed by the magic cure. Many of them have died. Many of them have had sudden, unexpected falls to the ground, shall we say. And there's a lot of people in severe difficulty. Now, I know this personally because people are emailing me all the time and telling me that just a few days after having the "you do what," then they've collapsed down. It's all part of the fear mongering. They want you to be frightened. And so we must rebut this. We must rebut it and say, I don't want to be frightened by this. And there are things we can do. For example, we can, and it does need a lot of us to do this, email our MPs. Now, I know how useless MPs are. I know that they just answer back with their simple sort of, oh, there's nothing to worry about, it's all safe and effective. Because people have been telling me that in response to one of my videos a month or so ago where I suggested maybe people should email their MPs, that they got these standard letters back, safe and effective, safe and nothing to see, move on, nothing to worry about. However, as more and more people do this, then there is this sort of worry, because what will eventually happen is, of course, all these MPs themselves will be swept away. If there's a big world government, what the MPs don't seem to realise, and this is actually the funny bit, is they won't have a job. They won't be needed anymore, because the big world government, the WHO and the WEF and Mr. Klaus Schwab, you know, the James Bond villain, he just needs a cat, doesn't he? They will be the ones giving the orders, and actually Parliament will just be there as a bit of a show and make out, well, it sort of is, isn't it, these days? It is a bit of a show, because let's face it, you have one party and another party, and they're both pretty much saying the same thing. You don't actually see any opposition to anything going on in the Parliament, so there's pretty much just a show. It's just there, a bit of theatre. So the more we tell the MPs that actually, do you know what, I don't want our sovereignty sold off, I don't want the autonomy of my body disappearing, it should not happen, and we refuse, we rebut the principle that you could sell our sovereignty in a treaty to the World Health Organization. And now we need to get loads and loads of people to do this, because if ones and twos aren't going to make any difference, and the MPs have to realise that they will be swept away easy as pie, and they probably don't want that to happen. So it's actually in their interest to pay attention. Yes, so we can do something about it. You see, the whole system, this sort of is worked on a bit like the legal profession. You see, the legal profession work on 12 presumptions. They presume things, and unless you actually rebut them and say no, they assume that you have consented. Now, you may not know this, but this is how this system works. It's a very strange system, and it's the same with the WHO, and they want to have our treaty, so the treaty sign that they have our sovereignty, so that we then become enslaved. Now, nobody wants that, so we have to rebut it and say, actually, no thank you, email to the MP and say, no, we do not give you our consent. If we don't do that, they'll assume that we have. So we do not give you consent. Send an email to your MP, send an email to the Prime Minister, send an email to anybody in the Cabinet. Keep talking, telling people about it. Because we can actually get something done, and we can refute this. But we actually have to refute it. We have to rebut it. We have to say no. Just sitting thinking, nah, it's not going to happen, is no good. Now, I'm going to put in the description just below a link where you can have a read yourselves to see what's going on. Don't be frightened. They want you to be scared. They want you to be contained in, say, something like 6 meters of space in a 15-minute lockdown city. They're obviously going to be getting rid of cars. There'll be some sort of light rail, but they want you to be contained. And of course, they want you to take something so that they can depopulate the planet from the 8 billion wonderful people that live here and are enjoying life to about 500 million, which, if you think about that, that's quite a small amount, kept away from the countryside, kept away from the beauty, kept away from the marvellous aesthetics and enjoyment of the world. That's what they want. But we can just say no, but we have to rebut it. So that's the task ahead of us. Anyway, I'll leave it in the description. Have a read if you so wish, and I will see you on another video, I'm sure, very soon.